some of our European investors. Look, always great timing to have a webinar when the share price has been hit overnight. And look, I certainly shouldn't make too much comment on that. It's disappointing, but hopefully over and above just giving today's sort of update, if you like. And I stress today's talk is really an update. I haven't put together like in terms of a presentation per se. It's a collection of ideas that I hopefully will get to the core of the questions people have to ask. And look, certainly as an early, some of you will know, an early stage Greatland investor myself, we can certainly spend some time focusing on the Patterson. I've got some good questions through from some people on Twitter. I'll do my best to answer them and hopefully provide some guidance for where we're going as a company. Look, Artemis is obviously ASX listed, and I am aware, having bought shares in the company overnight, that it's not always ideal to purchase those, putting overnight orders on, etc. But again, we have, we're looking at the potential to potentially dual list in this country. It's a process that I've done quite a number of times before. I think for the minute, and hopefully as demonstrated today, you'll see that we have a lot on our plate, and we want to really focus on delivering those results. But look, I'm going to start with Carlo Castle. Just a brief introduction for people. It's a really unusual position to be in a company where you've got two great projects. Virtually all junior mining companies, certainly ones that I've invested in the past, have a quote unquote flagship project, and everything runs a bit subsidiary. And certainly when I took the helm just over 12 months ago, I very much had eyes on the Patterson, and we'll get onto that. But Carlo Castle is a company maker in itself. And I'm just going to give you a quick overview of ideas, not a boring presentation, just to maybe explain why, what news to look out for that we've been putting out for the last couple of months, and what news to look out for going forward. Hopefully you can see in front of you a slightly isometric map of the Carlo Castle area. And in this sort of goldy bronze yellow colour is the existing resource outline that constitutes about just under 420,000 ounces, starting at surface, going about 1.6 grams a tonne gold, 0.6 copper, and with some great cobalt credits in there. In the current market environment, Carlo is saddled with the burden of having a resource. What do I mean by that? What I mean is that people take one look at the resource and think, well, it's a great start, but it's not quite big enough. Obviously, that's it. So we'll move on and not apply any value to that. I would like people, if in very simple terminology, to look at Carlo Castle as a blank sheet of paper with nearly 500,000 ounces just happen to be sitting in the middle of it. People who are involved in this industry, and myself included, will always talk up and say that there is, unlimited exploration potential, and that is sometimes the case, but it rarely is the case. I think Carlo Castle certainly falls into the potential box, and simply because it's a type of mineralisation that hasn't been seen before in the Pilbara. It's the reason it only got drilled to 420,000 ounces is because the company effectively ran out of money to drill any more holes. Hence, when we came in and took over the company. And lastly, and most obviously, is every drill hole we put into Carlo Castle, or certainly most of them, seem to be finding more gold, copper, and cobalt wherever we put them. Having a look at this map, certainly we're not in it, unlike our Patterson project, which has some logistical challenges, albeit they're certainly not as difficult as we thought they were. Now we've got some runs on the board out there, but we're in a very well-developed area, and we are currently drilling at Carlo Castle as we speak, and we will basically, as we have been for most of last year, continually drilling throughout the year. The last resource upgrade was done nearly 2 years ago. We have all the drill holes we've done to date, which is quite a number, have yet to be put into that resource model to upgrade it. The simple reason is we have a project called Project 1 Million. You don't have to be a brain surgeon to understand what that means. We want to get this deposit to a minimum of 1 million ounces before we start talking about development. And I think that that's for very sound reasons on both a cash flow basis and making sure that it's in that big scale of gold mining, or certainly at the bottom tier of the big scale. And we're pretty confident that we can blast past 1 million ounces. And again, people often say that, but the geology and the results have to back that up. Just looking down straight down onto the Carlo Castle deposit. You can see again this yellow outline of the resource. You can see holes that have been drilled in the past and their max values. And this is really just to give you a flavour today of where we think these ounces are going to come from. And this is solely within the near resource area, i.e. a kilometre or two, okay? We have another 20 kilometres of potential, quote unquote. I'm not going to bore you to tears today. We're talking about blue sky mining. Let's talk about what we can deliver in the near term here. We've been talking about this new northern zone, which is a lengthy zone that actually flows down into the overall resource existing resource, and we're delivering some cracking results from surface there. We've got a new zone in the middle here where we've just started drilling, and keep your eyes out for the drilling results of that. Why are we doing that? We want to add big tons of very shallow near surface or at surface mineralization, all to just throw into the resource model, okay? And that's the first kind of ore that you drill. I think what's really interesting about Carlo is it's not going to be marooned at 1.6 grams per tonne, which is still a very credible gold grade from surface. There is nothing wrong with it. It's not the highest grade gold deposit in the world, but it's certainly not on the sort of will they, won't they gold grade as well. It's certainly on the right side of where you want to be. You add in the copper, which is almost adding a gram per tonne gold, effective metal value, and the cobalt, and you can see that it is a very attractive, what we call a meaty gold project. So we're going to add those shallow ounces and just stick with us while we keep drilling them. And like I said, I suspect had we not had a resource at all, everyone would be speculating and giving us far more credence for the work we're doing. But hey, that's life at the moment. I'm going to show you a couple of cross sections through here in black, just very quickly, or one of them that just really shows what we're doing at depth. We have a system that runs directly below. It's a continuation of the existing mineralization from surface. It keeps going. We've drilled it down to 500 meters already. And again, this is a long section through that resource. This is just a quick cut, slice through here. This just demonstrates the existing resource and pit outlines in red that we're proposing. And you can see we've managed to hit it down here. These holes are actually coming towards you or out of the page. So these are the intercepts. And these black arrows are just simply indicating that it's effectively open in all directions. So what a wonderful thing to start with some open pits and then aim for some large tonnage, 4 or 5 meter wide intercepts of very high grade gold. And I would state, and some of you may have seen our release of this week, of last week, very high grade copper and cobalt going along with it. Just looking at the slice through that, again, these two slices here, just to give you a flavour what we're doing. And I know many of you will be sort of used to looking at these sort of cross sections these days. This is just a flavour of the resource up here, of what it looks like through that particular slice, and give you an indication of what we were targeting at depth. Bearing in mind, this goes from surface down to 500 metres now. I think we'd all agree that's a pretty impressive gold system already. Great gold numbers, but keep an eye on the cobalt and the copper. They're almost more than byproducts, certainly on our other cross section where we've got 3 grams gold, fine, add in a couple of percent copper, and 2.62% cobalt is quite frankly spectacular. Now, the whole thing's not going to go though, that sort of grade, but if we start to look at, targeting for sort of an average style of mineralization, we see that as a very lucrative target. We're going to keep growing there. And again, just to give you an idea, just for sake, I don't mark up this core. Our geologist having a bit of a laugh with the dollar sign there. I think some people take things a bit seriously. And he did mark that up before it was assayed, and lo and behold, he was right. And just a nice, pretty picture, but just so you understand what we're looking for at depth there. And this is all part of blasting past 1 million ounces at Carlo. People always ask, why don't you start production? You've got Radio Hill, etc. Look, Radio Hill is a great asset and it's worth a lot of money, but it is not ready to treat ore. You get the horse and the cart around the right way here. We want to build up a massive resource at Carlo Castle as big as we can. That will then drive the development plan. Whether or not Radio Hill is the site of that processing, or we sell it, or we build a new plant, well, they're discussions for further down the line. We're just scoping out how many ounces we can get to, and we're targeting multi-million ounces at Carlo. So I know a lot of you will be, especially in this part of the world, will be focused on the Pattersons. I wanted to give you an inclination of what I think is a vastly undervalued gold project that really is fighting for attention with the Pattersons. And again, I do understand that. Again, oddly enough, this was a webinar I gave in Australia where oddly, I think the understanding of what Havieron is in some ways a bit stronger here, due to Greatland Gold being the junior that was involved. What is a gold mine? What does a modern gold mine look like? Okay, I'm not going to condescend people, but this is the super pit in Kalgoorlie, and traditionally where the West Australian gold industry views the left as a gold mine and views the right as some sort of odd behaviour that South Africans and people in other countries undertake. Now, I know a lot of you follow Newcrest in terms of their technologies and what they're developing within their portfolio, because obviously Havieron is a key part of that. But I wanted to sort of digress slightly to talk about, unless you understand, I think, what we're trying to achieve at the Pattersons and what I suspect the other proponents in the area, certainly in the key people in our area, which are Greatland Gold and Newcrest, really. Hopefully I'll sort of contextualise that in terms of what we think is possible, because the notion of the gold camp seems to be being a little bit overlooked here. Now, this is Cadia. Many of you will be familiar. It's the largest gold mine in Australia. It is not geologically the same as the Patterson region, but it provides a good clue of what a gold mine looks like today. These red areas are basically the resource largely mined out today. And on the right and the left, you can see two very large pods of gram metre gold mineralisation that is currently subject to the development and the future reserve and mine plan of Cadia. This is 1,000 metres. So you can see this resource is currently drilled to about 1,700 metres, which is not incomparable to what seems to be going on in our neck of the woods. I draw your attention to the grade profiles of Cadia, just to say, I'm just trying to demonstrate what the power of block caving and bulk underground mining is today. And I took all this off Newcrest website, so it's freely available for you to go and have a look. But have a look at the grades and have a look at the copper grades, and there's some lovely credits there, etc. This is a deposit that is bulk mined at a depth comparable or deeper to the Havieron development, or the sort of depths of which we're targeting well as Artemis. And look at the grades that are standing up, and more importantly, look at their all-in sustaining. Sorry about that. Look at their all-in sustaining costs, $160 an ounce, and look at the production profile of that mine. I haven't bothered to do the ranking, but I suspect if Cadia were a company, it would probably be the second or third largest gold company in Australia on its own. So trying to demonstrate how a gold camp can develop, and you can have the attractiveness these days of these bulk underground mines. And they have another sort of less tangible or less obvious benefit, is from an ESG perspective. You're not creating an open pit. You have the ability to place your tailings back from where you got them. And all in all, that can only have a positive effect on development. So I just wanted to draw your attention. This is a 5 kilometre long corridor. It is a different set of geology, but that's what a mining camp looks like in the old sense. Just going on to so here's Havieron. And again, this isn't our project, but it's important to understand I want to make some key points about how that impacts. When you're a company that's drilling nearby a big discovery, quite rightly get tagged being your neurology, and that's what you're playing on some sort of market, some sort of marketing exercise. Now that can be very true, and you'll see that a lot in the industry. But what if there's something a lot deeper in it about what caused that deposit that you're then applying to your ground, and what does that mean for your ability to go and find something? I'm not going to tell a lot of you about Havieron. You probably understand more about me, but I just want to make a couple of points. Well, we all understand the depth, and the depth really is not that challenging. As we drilled our first holes at Nimitz, and I was very, very pleasantly surprised at how easily we get through that cover. That 420 odd 450 meters of Permian cover is not very consolidated. What I mean by that, it's not very hard. It's effectively, in the largest number of places, is like a version of hard chalk. And you could core through that at an absolute rate of knots and at a very competitive cost. So I think we can all agree we just need to throw this notion of cover as somehow a challenge to the development of any of these deposits. Just we need to throw that out the window because it's just patently not true. But you would be surprised how many times I talk to us fund managers who tell me that, oh, Havieron will never be developed because it's too deep, in which case I point out it's under construction and they have a bemused look on their face. It's all about gram meters. And again, going back to the Cicadia example, it's all about gram meters. So that's creating large, reliable bulk blocks of rock that you can extract. You know what you're going to get. You can build a big reserve and you can mine it extremely efficiently. And look, I think that's clearly what's going on here. I just want to draw your attention on the right-hand side to the plan section. Again, you guys will know a lot more, as much as I do about this. And all I want to talk about are two features, is the green dike and the purple crescent. They're the two key elements I want to talk about. The purple element is the whole high sulfide zone that has a geophysical signature. And it is a very nice constituent of the existing resource and has good grade attached. And as we well know, what seems to be cropping up here now, other than that, are a large number of breccia or sub-deposits in breccia with various names. And on this map, I believe the latest one sits somewhat in this position. Now, what's important about that? First of all, there's been a lot of attention paid to the bullseye geophysical signature of that deposit. And somehow people believe it's related to a discrete intrusive that sits below that deposit. And that is just not true. And the reason it has a geophysical signature is only related to this sulfide zone, which is actually probably a geochemical result. The breccias themselves probably have very low relative geophysical signature. So what does that mean? That means while it's almost the tail wagging the dog, the geophysics got you in there, but the geophysics isn't necessarily the only sole controlling factor on the ability of anyone's ground, ours, Greatland's, Rio Tinto's, or Newcrest, to be mineralised. And that's really exciting for everybody, okay? Because what does seem to be a coincidence is this dike. Now that dike, in my view, is a later dike. Well, we know it's a later unmineralised dike that's come in on a large plane of regional scale plane of weakness that runs for another 20 or 30 kilometres. I don't think there's much doubt of that. Now that plane is otherwise known as a major fault or splay fault that runs off a pretty well known Havieron fault. So they're the two key elements I'd like people to understand. Over here on the right is probably a difficult, it's difficult to view, unfortunately. I couldn't find a good map, but this is Kalgoorlie here. I don't know how many hundred millions of ounces Kalgoorlie's produced over the last 150 years. And all I wanted to demonstrate here is this line here is the major regional structure with a whole lot of subsplays coming off. And lo and behold, these are the major, well, a lot of the major gold producing areas in Western Australia as it goes up. There are many others, but it's just a good example of what we're talking about, of a gold camp lining up on a major regional structure. So you've got a lot of different geology. You've got a lot of different styles of gold deposit. You don't, just because one gold deposit looks like this, the one 5 kilometres away doesn't have to look identical. It's the plumbing we're interested in. On the left-hand side, and again, this is part of the seismic work that was done in the that we have, that actually runs just to the, obliquely through our ground, but runs into where just south of the Havieron deposit, like only by 1 kilometre or 2, and then continues into Artemis ground, with some seismic work done in the late 1980s by the West Australian government. And it shows some really interesting things. It shows the depth to basement, or interpreted depth to basement, on a seismic line here. It shows some indications, i.e. in an oil and gas sort of methodology, of what's going on below. Havieron sits roughly here and extends roughly here. Now, that's not the point of what the point I'm trying to make is, the interpreted on this blue dot is this major fault coming up and being terminated here. And we believe that these major faults are what we call the plumbing. And this is our thesis of why we think we've got some. So you may have seen some of these diagrams on the left-hand side, very colourful. Look, it shows the location of our projects and the locations of the discoveries to date. This is the major Havieron thrust fault. But this major green line is the dike infilling, this major northern fault that continues all the way through our ground and up into the new Newcrest JV and into Rio Tinto's ground. And we believe this is the major controlling function. Major fault, secondary fault running off. And for those with a wanting to do a bit of research, that is gold 101. Major fault with a secondary fault running off is a very common and well understood emplacement model for major gold camps, not just one gold deposit. So with that in mind, this is gravity. Don't get too excited by all these pink colors. What's really important is this low, and this is the interpreted granite that actually sits about 3 kilometers below the surface. And what that is, that's the heat engine that has driven the fluids, etc., the mineralizing event or / events back in the 1.6 billion years ago. So what we find is this now opens up a whole world of possibilities for our thesis, and bearing in mind that every time we come up with an idea, our drill testing, we test that thesis. So we've got a major fault, as you'll be well aware, Havieron fault. We've got the secondary fault sitting here, and lo and behold, the Havieron deposit sitting right over the top of it. And we've got some of our better projects sitting over here. We drilled Nimitz, as some of you will know. These are just some examples of the rocks that we discovered. We released 71 grab samples earlier this week, and the market didn't seem to like it. They seemed to believe that there was going to be full assays. And of course, again, I think many of you will be aware the time taken to drill and then transport, cut core and have it assayed is pretty long at the moment. And I said we were all waiting for those other results for quite a long time. So rather than wait infinitum, we decided to do these. We actually took these samples as the holes were being drilled. The guys put them in their hand luggage when they flew on shift change, and then we got them assayed. And that was simply so we could have a snapshot. And what do I mean by a snapshot? When we look at the rocks, say for example on the right, we talk about brecciated, overprinted ironstone. These are all the signposts we have to look for something could be mineralized. If we'd just seen 400 meters of plain limestone, well, we would have thrown our hands up and said, there's no life system, let alone any chance of any mineralization in here. So when we look at this rock, we don't know whether there's any gold in it or not. I'm not blessed with X-ray goggles, and certainly on the left-hand side, you can see the same. These are all the sort of things we're looking for. I think where we did, and we made it clear in our presentation, what we didn't see were massive sulfides like you saw, say, in some of the fantastic bits of core from Havieron, released by Greatland and later Newcrest. And so I think that probably told us that, look, it looks like we're close. It looks like there's something down there, but we don't feel we've made a major discovery just yet. And we make no bones about that. Plenty of people will sort of point and say, well, you didn't get a result. Well, I'm afraid that if Greatland and the guys had given up 3 or 4 years ago of being told no the whole time, then there would be no Havieron discovery, and I'm sure we'd all agree on that. And unfortunately, the pathway to discovery is littered with the body of naysayers. They all disappear when you're successful. So this is what we meant in our release, and it's very difficult to articulate because there is a lot of technical nature, and to be frank, I think the market's quite impatient at the moment across a whole range of stocks. Lots of gold stocks I own have gone down quite a lot in the last 2 months. I think people want instant results tomorrow. I get that. We accept that. We do our best to articulate to people what's going on, and they can always contact us, and where we don't put them over the wall regulatory wise, we're happy to talk. But this is what we're discovering. So when we say we think we were close, we genuinely think we were close, and hopefully some of you can some sort of chit chat about that, and hopefully agree with what we're saying. We're now actually cutting assays or intervals of core. We've started that now. We're going to put that core in for assay. I have no doubt there will be more gold, or highly likely there will be more gold in these rocks. We're only taking very small pieces of rock on the rig so people can put them in their hand luggage. Stick with us. Let's see what's there. We don't think it constitutes a Havieron-like champagne moment, but we certainly think we want to use that level of mineralization to help vector the next set of drilling. So what's coming up next? A lot of you guys and girls would have seen these ionic leach geochem maps, which I think they tell their own story. I don't need to articulate too much on them other than other than pointing out the obvious that Apollo and Atlas, not just on a geochem, they have a structural element to them, i.e. being close to that fault. I think we always thought they were our best targets, and this certainly reinforces it. We published the gold and copper numbers. I think they're the easiest to understand because people feel they're the metals we're looking for. What's probably more interesting for the biggest sort of Telfer and West Australian rock nerds is you'll note that we published the bismuth and tellurium as well, because we do have similar looking anomalies for those. While they're not the economic elements we're looking for, they are by and large generally understood to be the best pathfinder elements, i.e. signpost elements for us in this particular region. And we did publish those in the actual announcement if you have a look. So that all supports what we're doing. We noted up a couple of other really nice targets there. And of course, we have a lot more work to do. You know, I think a lot of you understand it's while the actual physical drilling was pretty quick and relatively easy, we managed to get 3 holes done for circa $900,000 raw drilling cost. So, you know, I had lots of people telling me we were going to spend $5 million to drill a few holes. It's just not true. Now, that's aided and abetted by the fact that Havieron has a large camp there now. So from a health and safety perspective, there's a 4G cell phone mast there now. So I can sit here in London and get each core tray as it comes up. In my lounge room in lockdown, which is pretty step change in the industry. But over and above that, we can work efficiently, safely to get the work done. Most of this work, or virtually all of this work, was done on foot. It's very hot, and we had just, when the weather got really too hot to have safely people walk the ground, we stopped the program. And that's just the way it is when you're working in a big grown-up desert like it is out there. In terms of what's coming up next, look, no secrets. We're itching to get back out on the ground. A lot of you who are and hopefully still are Greatland Gold shareholders will understand it's extremely hot and extremely wet up there at this time of year. And again, if you've hopefully read our announcements, you'll be clear that we never intended to work between December and March at the earliest. It's just too hot. It's okay when you're Newcrest and you're capped at $31 billion. You can build a nice big air-conditioned camp. That's fine. And look, with success, we'll get bigger. You know, we can put that logistic in, but at the moment, that's our plan. So we want to be back out on the ground as soon as possible. That requires the logistics, the planning. It requires the heritage approval to do that. All of which is in train. We don't see any problems in achieving those timeframes, but we're not specifically in control, i.e. up to a week and a day, or we just work within a very well-trodden framework to do everything right and to the letter of the law. But we'll soon be back out there drilling. And our plan is very simple, is to come in on Apollo and Atlas. Our confidence is as high as you could be until you actually drill a hole. Amusingly, I note that Apollo spills into not only Newcrest, Greatland Newcrest JV, it also spills into other companies' ground, which almost guarantees that there's a mineral deposit there, because the geology gods always have a sense of humour and put them on tenement boundaries. But we have a lot of work to do. You know, once we get out on the ground, hopefully in early Q2, you know, we intend to hit all of these targets, and we're very confident we're going to get some results. And look, you know, I know there's a lot of compare and contrast to an existing discovery here, but it's important to go through and explain this, because unless people understand what you're trying to achieve and what the prize is at the end of the story, then it's very difficult to talk about what why you should invest in our company. And I think the simple reality of the matter is we specifically chose to keep 100% of our tenement. Okay. And the simple reason is that another company has come along and broken the code and has been successful out there. That then changes inherently the dynamic for us. Okay. There is a mine under construction there today, and I think most of you know that. And that changes the way we can then have a lot more luxury that perhaps Gervais and Callum didn't have when they drilled their first holes. Okay. And that's just the nature of exploration. Once there's discovery and development, it creates a center of gravity around that. But we've decided, we've had lots of very interesting approaches from lots of different companies from around the world. to get involved in what we're doing. We're politely, not arrogantly, but politely said thank you, but no thank you. But now we can see the size of the prizes on offer, and hopefully what we think is a regional gold camp. We believe that we believe that we can safely, efficiently, and value for money test our targets, and we see the leverage to exploration success is quite remarkable, and something that and I've spoken to Callum on numerous occasions. Something that I don't think he ever thought he would be involved in a discovery of the nature of Havieron, and it's very much on record of what I think it's going to end up being in terms of ounces. And I didn't think I would get a chance at that either. So it really is that kind of once in a career opportunity, certainly in a grown-up company like Australia. So that's really it for sort of just sharing some ideas, guys. I hope it's been useful. Of course, under ASX rules, I'm not allowed to present you with data that hasn't been presented before. So I wanted to keep it a little less structured and make sure we didn't cross those boundaries. I was just looking at my Twitter. I had some good questions from people, Tim. So I was just going to, for the sake of brevity, I was just going to grab a couple of them. And I said I'd get some of the trickier ones and some of the easier ones.
So they've also point your attention to the Q&A section on the below here. We can answer them over the next little bit.
Yeah, sure. Okay. Well, I'll start on a couple, and if then we can, Tim, if people want to, I don't know the mechanism for shooting you the questions, and you can ping them to me. But look, first of all, are you going to raise money before you drill in the Pattersons? Look, we have $7.5 million in the bank at the moment. And I think you all understand, we're getting towards the end of February now. So, we're not a million miles off in terms of hopefully back out on the ground. So the short answer is we don't intend to raise money, and we certainly wouldn't be raising money at the current share price levels anyway. So we certainly have time. And of course, we're an exploration company. At some stage, we will raise more money. That is just a reality. But of course, our job is to raise that at ever higher prices. So making sure that all shareholders, you're actually really creating value along the way and not just diluting them. But at the moment, we have no pressing need to raise money. Our major outflows are still drilling on Carlo, and everything we do is we can hit the brake or hit the accelerator over and above. But look, I'd also make the point we're extremely disciplined on our capital raise in August. We took 80 million shares at 7 cents. That's because I'm not that good at adding up. But we would have been offered in excess of $25 million. But we're not a bank. It's not our job to walk around with a huge bank balance. It means I don't have to worry about anything, but it means we dilute the hell out of ourselves along the way. And as a major shareholder and option holder in this company, I'm just not going to do it. So that's the best answer I can give there. In terms of, I was asked about production from sort of Radio Hill, etc. Look, previous management had a vision for the company that involved short-term or near-term production. That's not our vision. We believe, I don't want to start Carlo Castle at 500,000 ounces when I think it's going to get to multi-million ounces. The company is in a resource growth phase. That's the value we can add. And the Radio Hill mine is not, a processing plant is not ready to process ores from Carlo Castle regardless. So we're not in a capex phase. We're in that growth phase. It's usually the best value accretion for shareholders is that growth phase too. So, but that's our sole focus. The fact that I've got a plant sitting there, it's not quite ready. It's not ready for production, but it's got a big tangible value. Well, great. Isn't that a nice problem to have? Tim, I got asked another question about Money, the Platinum Project, which you probably haven't heard much about. Look, unfortunately, our minority partner in that project has initiated a legal process. We believe they're trying to bully us into selling that project back to them. All I would do, we proposed a share-based deal with a small UK shell, and I'd make some comments on that. We realised over $9 million in funds for the company last year that we didn't have to raise by issuing shares. First of all, they were projects we were never going to take forward. So what is the point in owning them? Holding projects costs a lot of money. You can't just sit there and put them in your pocket. It doesn't cost you anything. And lastly, people who go out and who buy projects off you don't just write you a big cash check. Okay, it just doesn't happen. What tends to happen is you take a bit of equity risk. So what do we want to do? We want that equity as cheaply as we can get. I want the maximum number of shares at the smallest price, so that price goes up and I make the maximum amount of money. I'll give you a good example of that. We sold a tennis court size tenement and some mining data to a very, and I'm not allowed to say what company it is, it's commercial confidence, a small AIM listed company for 120 grand last year. We took most of that in shares because they don't have cash. Luckily, those shares went up 14-fold and we sold it for $1.5 million in cash. So that was a great result. So the idea behind money was to get it into a cheaply priced shell, so the value of that shell goes up, so we then turn an illiquid asset into a liquid asset, and it's as simple as that. Unfortunately, the individuals behind this company have caused all sorts of legal issues, which we've defended vigorously, and we're waiting for the ruling of the judge, and we're very confident they will see in front of us. And our task then is to, unfortunately, that transaction fell over. Our task is then to find another buyer for the project, because we have all the work to do with Carlo and the Pattersons. They're company making projects on their own. So that's that, and you'll see more from divestments. I'm trying to think if I had any other questions, really. I think that's basically it from the ones I remember on Twitter. So any other ones, Tim?
Yeah, I've got a couple here relating to what you've already touched on with Radio Hill. Would it not be, why is it ready to process ore for the Carlo deposit yet? And in associated infrastructure, what do you expect the bill to get that into production would be?
Yeah, sure. Look, good question. Difficult to answer because I'm slightly constrained by sort of regulatory. I'm not allowed to talk about CapEx until it's been properly scoped, but I can give you a lick of the fingers. Look, let me step back a bit. A multi-million ounce resource at Carlo Castle means we build a new processing plant at Carlo Castle. That is what real success looks like. A 1 million tonne per annum plant at Carlo Castle is a commodity in Western Australia. It's an off-the-shelf. It's a collection of off-the-shelf materials. It's extremely well understood. There are dozens of them around the state. That is what success looks like, as a 2 or 3 million ounce deposit at Carlo, and that's what we do. If there's then a section of gradated success that does involve Radio Hill, well, then we'll get to that. But I would just make some comments on just some very headline comments on what Radio Hill is and isn't. Radio Hill was a nickel mine. Previous management spent some money doing it up, and certainly the front end, or the crushing, or the gravity plant is certainly, it's got some attraction. I think the overall milling capacity at about 400 kilotons is too small, so you would need to upgrade that. In terms of your back end of the plant, as we call it, where you're going to get your copper, your cobalt, and any of the gold that didn't come out in gravity, there's various components to that plant there, but it's certainly not in a position where it's ready to go. But the key point is, if you've got a really big resource, you don't want a really small plant. It's just counterintuitive. So we need to scope up the resource. Will drive the decision on the plant. So that's probably the best answer I could give, Tim, because, and do forgive me, I'm just regularly not allowed to talk about CapEx. It's just a no-no.
It's another one in terms of the Pattersons is, what are your thoughts on the soils at Apollo seem to be higher copper and lower gold than Javier on?
Look, I wouldn't read too much into that, because again, as I think I intimated earlier, actually, surprisingly, two of the more interesting elements are really bismuth and tellurium, and if people want to get online and have a sniff around there, I'm sure there's lots of papers about that of the region. Look, I wouldn't read too much into the relative amounts. I think that's probably trying to read too much into it, if you like. It's really it's not so much, it's the size of the abundance as opposed to the intensity of it, I think, is more telling. Okay, you've got to be careful with data sets, because sometimes you can generate them and get the answer you want. I think we're all aware of that in this modern age. It's really important to have your ideas and have your models spread up, and hopefully the data confirms it and not the other way around. And we're really careful to do that, because sometimes you just get the answers you want. So no, I wouldn't read too much into that at all. And as I said, the reason why Apollo and Atlas are great targets, look, this reinforces a lot of what we knew, but that's not the only reason. You've got to have a whole ranking of reasons of why you're going to drill holes there. But yeah, hey, they're fantastic results. Let's not get past that. We were absolutely thrilled when we saw them. But again, perversely, probably bismuth and tellurium were as important, but we didn't want to rock nerd out too much and let everyone know. So yeah.
And this was the last one, at least for the moment, is the drill program at Apollo and Atlas, which is upcoming or in the works. How many holes do you see sinking into both of those targets?
Yeah, good question. We're actually planning all of that right now. But look, I'm happy to give you an idea of guidance. I think Nimitz is probably a good idea. I would see at least 3 into each target. I mean, it is funny. And again, I'm not trying to overplay Nimitz because, we call a spade, okay? But as many of you will know, some of the holes drilled in the 90s and 1 or 2 earlier holes were actually pretty close to Javier and they really didn't get anything. I mean, 0, big donut. And they certainly, from what I can read in the literature, didn't really see any alteration or brecciation within that. And that's why, I mean, we're close. So when we drilled Nimitz, we looked at the core and that's hopefully used as a vector or as a signpost of where to drill the next hole. That's why we drilled 3 holes there, because we thought the next hole had a good chance of hitting the jackpot. Now, from what we know now, just from 71 samples, it probably didn't or it got close to doing that. At Apollo and Atlas, I think we'd be looking to do a minimum of 3 holes each. And then we'll just take it from there. But to be absolutely clear, putting a hole down the pickle barrel, you really should know within the first couple of holes. I mean, it's as simple as that. And I don't want to underplay. I mean, the danger in talking up a couple of targets, Tim, is that you can be in danger of underplaying your other targets. Now, that's just life. People always ask you, it's like on a football side. People ask you, who's your best striker, who's your best goalie, whatever. I get it. You've got to give them an answer. But I wouldn't underplay Enterprise and the rest of our targeting as well. But yeah, I would think 2 to 3 holes per target as a start. And of course, if we see what we hope we're going to see, well, all bets are off. And we've certainly got a drilling contactor that's keen to get another 10 rigs up there. So yeah, that's probably the best way I can answer that. But just to be clear, guys and girls, our program, while we won't publish the minutiae of it, once we get closer to the date, when we have a better visual on actual touchdown date or something like that, we will be giving you updates. We're not going to give you blow-by-blow updates of how many biscuits I had at breakfast or anything like that, but we will be giving you updates on what the program's going to look like. Okay, so yeah, keep an eye out.
Well, that pretty much wraps us up then, I think.
Terrific. Look, thanks for everyone for joining.
One last one's just come through. Said, given drilling finished late last year, what assays are still left to come through?
From Patterson's, I assume, or Carlo. I'll answer both. I might as well, and again, this is nothing we haven't said in public announcement. Carlo, we still have the last batch of assays from 2020. We've been drilling since January 4, and we should start, actually, as we get the last batch of 2020, because we've been submitting samples since early January, perversely, our 2021 Carlo project, we should start seeing those results coming through in about 2 or 3 weeks. So we're not suffering some big news blackout in terms of assays, etc. And a lot of you're going to see a lot of focus on Carlo in terms of getting people to really put some proper value on that project. On the Pattersons, they're all to come. I mean, this is the sort of perverse nature, and a rather sort of cynical, one of my fellow directors said, we probably were better off not putting out the 71 samples. But that's not why we do this. We're not here to promote a story. We're here to find a tier 1 gold copper discovery. So I'm more than happy to share the data. So we only put 71 grab samples in. The guys are literally cutting core of the interesting intervals now, and there are lots of them. They may have gold in them, they may not. I frankly do not know. So we will probably, the core cutting will probably take another week and a bit, Tim. And then that's been done at our Radio Hill facility, and we'll dispatch them straight down to Perth. So, oh gosh, I mean, it's the bane of anyone's existence, predicting assay results. RC chips are a lot quicker than diamond, but I would suggest sort of 8 weeks after that, mate. So we should hopefully get a better indication. And look, we could be pleasantly surprised. I just frankly do not know, because we don't have X-ray glasses. But we expect some more gold anomalism in there, whether it's a gram. I really, really don't know. So I'd say probably, to answer the question directly, I think we'll probably see those Patterson's results in about 10 weeks' time. So that's just the nature of the game at the moment, I'm afraid.
And the lucky last, which
Yep.
what's the expectation of time for the heritage permit? I'm assuming this is due to the
Oh, look, and again, I think we all followed that with Greatland as well. Look, it's probably not right for me to comment on that, Tim, because these are both they're matters we take seriously. All I would point is the timeframes that have been achieved to both permit and start construction at Havieron have been outstanding. So there's obviously a good relationship there, and there's a good relationship in terms of one can assume, while there always be sites of sensitivity, both ethnographically and physically, archaeologically, we're certainly not in a particularly. It doesn't seem like an overtly sensitive area. If I could just draw the Rio Tinto analogy, which was a whole different kettle of fish, and 2,000 miles away. But look, we will do it as quickly and as diligently as we can. I think probably we're not going to provide guidance, i.e. a date or something like that. I think that would be improper because we don't physically control the process, but we're just going to do our best. But look, we'll manage expectations as we go. We don't see any great issues in front of us. We just have a process we're going to go through. So just bear with us. And to be frank, that's probably, that's one of the key tasks of the company now, to make, the reality of our tenement, by the way, is we only really want access to a really small part of it anyway, for the minute. So just bear with us on that one, guys. We'll do our best.